All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, if it wasn't then you better believe that the college football is the new frontier of the wild, wild west. And I say that because the battle for recruiting is at an all time high. Head coaches are making upwards of $10 million per year and leaving powerhouse schools for other powerhouse schools to do it. We've seen players start to get money from name, image, and likeness deals. And the transfer portal has turned things, has really changed things for a lot of players and a lot of schools on the college football scene. But with everything involved, is it better for the game or is it worse? I'll let you answer that question. But regardless of what you think, lawlessness in college football to me is running rampant due to the fact that the rules are not the same for everyone. And most importantly, it's quite clear that the NCAA cannot govern things. Now, you look at the college football playoff. There are some institutions that are okay with it just being four teams, and then there are some institutions that want it expanded. And being that everybody involved cannot agree, right now, this playoff is still going to have four teams. You think about it, the good and the bad of the transfer portal. I mean, to me, I feel like the transfer portal is good for a lot of these players. Of course, with anything else, there are always going to be people that take advantage of it. And I mean, you think about the transfer portal, it's changed things because for so many years, players, if they did decide to transfer from one school to another, they had to sit out a year unless they went from a D1 school down to a D2 school. It's a situation now. I've always felt, players should have the option to transfer because let's be realistic. Some of these coaches that recruit you, they leave or they get fired. And I feel like, okay, if the coach leaves, whether he gets fired, whether he decides to take another job, or even an assistant coach who recruited you to that school and he leaves, and gets fired, you definitely have the opportunity to get out of there. And especially where you have instances where some coaches would not allow a player to transfer from one school in the conference to another. No, definitely that player should have that opportunity. But I feel like with anything else, there's always going to be people that take advantage of it because we've seen some kids transfer multiple times where, okay, fine. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt if you're going to do it one time. But some of these kids are transferring two or three times, and sometimes it just boils down to playing time. And sometimes you're not getting the playing time because you have to improve your game. So I think that's something right there where just the little tweaking of the rule would be good. Not to say that these kids should not have the opportunity to go from school to school, but definitely a little tweaking of the rule. And then recently we've seen Alabama's head football coach Nick Saban, his recent comments in regards to Texas A&M head coach Jimbo Fisher, as well as Jackson State head football coach Deion Sanders. And it basically, Saban is accusing both Fisher and Sanders of paying for their guys. And to me, Saban can say whatever he wants. He can spin it whatever way that he wants to. But the bottom line is this. Obviously, Deion Sanders is not coaching the SEC. But you think about Georgia and Texas A&M within the SEC. And of course, Jimbo's at Texas A&M. And then, of course, Kirby Smart is at Georgia. They have closed the gap recruiting wise on Alabama. It's no longer a scenario where Alabama is going to go out there and get the top recruiting class every year. And it's no longer a scenario where Alabama's going to sit up there and have six guys get drafted in the first round every year and everybody else takes a back seat. We saw Georgia just last month at the NFL draft set the record for most guys drafted in one class. And of course, A lot of that was due in part to the historic defense that we saw from Georgia this past season, as well as the fact that they were able to win the national championship and beat Alabama in the process. And don't get me wrong, that's not saying that Alabama all of a sudden program wise fell off a cliff. Absolutely not, because Alabama is still one of the premier programs in college football, and they are still sending their fair share of talent to the National Football League. But the bottom line is the SEC is no longer the exclusive province of Nick Saban in Alabama. And the same thing can be said recruiting wise. So things are changing. And just like it is for everybody, for everything else, people have to learn how to adjust and adapt. But I'll tell you like this, the comments of Nick Saban and the rebuttal from Kirby Smart are going to make that Alabama Texas A&M game must see TV if it was not already, because I mean we saw Alabama and A&M get it on in prime time last season, and it was an epic as the Aggies were able to defeat the Crimson Tide in College Station. Of course, the mega conferences play into this as well. I mean, and this is something that just did not begin. You go back to the early '90s when the SEC decided to go from 10 teams to 12 teams. And that was them getting South Carolina on board. And then, of course, getting Arkansas to leave the soon to be defunct Southwest Conference for the Southeast Conference. And by doing so and getting 12 teams and having two 6-team divisions, they were allowed to have a conference championship game. And then little by little, we saw other conferences around the nation see how much money was involved from having a conference championship game, especially with the SEC. At first few years, it was televised on ABC and then subsequently CBS. But nonetheless, the other conferences began to see how lucrative this could be for them. Of course, the Big 12 soon followed suit. And of course, the Big 12 had to be created with the teams from the Big 8 conference and then several holdovers, such as Texas, from the soon to be defunct Southwest Conference. Pretty soon the Big 12 got in line. Then we saw the ACC get on board, and then eventually the Pac-12 and Big 10 as well. But now we've seen it go beyond 12 teams, as some of these the conferences rather have 14 teams, like in the case of the SEC and the Big 10 and the ACC. And pretty soon the SEC is going to go to 16 teams when you factor in both Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12. So, my question is, should conferences stick to the divisional format? And I bring that up because the Pac 12 is scrapping it, and the ACC more than likely is soon going to follow suit. But for me, you hear about what the Pac-12 is saying in regards to it, and they just want to make sure that they ensure that the two best teams from their conference are playing in the conference title game, because this is all about the pursuit to try to get a team to the college football playoff. From the Pac-12 standpoint, for the most part, if you look at it, the Pac-12 usually gets the two teams from their conference in the conference championship game, from the Pac-12 North and the Pac-12 South. There have only been several instances for the Pac-12 where it did not happen. One was a year where USC was on probation and UCLA had to represent the Pac-12 South with a sub 500 record. That part of it I totally get, but for the most part, we've seen a top 15 meeting between the Pac-12 North winner and the Pac-12 South winner. You go back this past season, basically it was right there for Oregon to win and get into the college football playoff. But Utah came out like gangbusters in that game and changed the landscape of it. So, you can try to tweak it all you want, but it comes down to teams handling their business. You think about the ACC, and, since the ACC championship game was created, First was it was the exclusive province of Virginia Tech, then Florida State, and now Clemson. And of course, Clemson did not win the ACC last year, as that honor fell to Pitt. But usually with the ACC championship game, that meeting is very lopsided in the favor of one team. The SEC and the Big Ten, it's a little bit different. With the Big Ten, I know that Ohio State has dominated the Big Ten championship game, but the Big Ten, more often than not, will give you a top 10 matchup in their conference championship game. And then in the case of the SEC, they'll typically give you a top five meeting in that game. And then, of course, this past year, we saw Alabama and Georgia meet in that game. And then subsequently, they met again for the national championship. Now, in the case of the Big 12, I think this is where everything started, because you go back about a decade when Colorado, Nebraska, A&M, and Missouri all left the Big 12 conference, leaving the Big 12 with eventually 8 teams. They got TCU and West Virginia to come in, and eventually they were able to get a waiver from the NCAA to have a Big 12 championship game, in spite of the fact that they did not have 12 schools, they only had 10 schools. A lot of that was just due to the fact that they wanted to be able to keep up with the Joneses and have an extra game for the playoff committee to watch while the big boys were playing. And I thought it was a waste of time for the Big 12 to have the games, due to the fact that, okay, you're playing a 9 game round robin conference schedule. Everybody has a chance to play everybody. So we really have an idea to see who stands out from the other teams, and that's what it all came down to. You look at it right now, and there are no rules in college football because the NCAA really does not control things. It comes down, you can't even say it really comes down to conference commissioners. For the most part, it comes down to the boosters and it comes down to the alumni, because they're going to control uh, who's going to be the head coach. They're going to, emphasize to the athletic director, to the school president, as far as what conference that they want to be affiliated with. And a lot of that comes down to who's going to get the what network and what conference is going to get the best TV money involved. So you look at things right now, and something has got to change. Will something change? I doubt it, because the thing is, there's nobody there to regulate things. And when you have a situation like this, the gap between the haves and the have-nots is only going to grow. You think about the college football playoff. I think it's fine, my personal opinion. Some people will agree with me, some people won't. That's all well and good. I think it's fine with 4 teams, because if you've looked since the creation of the college football playoff, typically in those semifinal meetings, we get blowouts. And I know there's always going to be somebody talking about, well, this team should have been in there. But the bottom line is this: in the old days, when it was just one champion awarded, without, and I say that without like 2 teams facing off for the national title, there was always that second team that felt like they should have gotten a shot. With the BCS, when we had the top 2 teams meeting for the national championship, there was always that third team that was griping about not getting an opportunity. Now, with the 4 team college football playoff, we're getting the 15. If you expand to 8 teams, you're going to get a 19. If you expand to 12 teams, you're going to get a 13th team. It's just like the NCAA tournament. There's always going to be somebody that is going to say we should have had our shot. And the problem for me is, if you're from a Power Five conference, just because you win your conference does not necessarily guarantee that you deserve an opportunity to get to the college football playoff. And that is what expanding the field would do. And at the end of the day, all of this is, it's about the chase of money. So will things change? I doubt it. But the bottom line is this: right now, we're seeing a situation in college football where nobody is there to control it. And with that said, this can and will lead to utter chaos. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Want to take the time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 pounds of sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.